Hello, my loves. Welcome back to another episode of the Letters to and from Women podcast. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. My name is Mariana. I am the host and founder of the Letters to and from Women podcast, of my somatic coaching practice, The Enlightened Women, and I am your nervous system's bestie. I'm your older sister on your journey to learning that complex trauma does not have to be a life sentence. It might mean that your life is a bit more intricate and a little on the messier side, but getting out of that rubble is actually what will, in great part, define the beauty of your life, the resiliency that you create for yourself, and the empowerment that you walk out of the chains of your past with.
This is an ode to the forgotten feminine, with love letters to and from all kinds of women. Here for the daughters carrying the world upon their spine, wherefore the silence of our grandmothers we rise. Here to remember our power and shed all doubt. Forget the bullshit the patriarchy's on about. This is an ode to the forgotten feminine, with love letters to and from all kinds of women.
So I recently saw a therapist who I love. His name is John Kim. He goes by the Angry Therapist on all social media platforms. I've been following him for years, and his own podcast is such a huge reason why I got into the world of podcasting myself. And he recently sat down for a conversation with his wife, Vanessa, and a friend of theirs, and they recorded this super intimate and really eye-opening conversation in like a slumber party format. They were all just sitting on a bed, I think in a hotel room in Costa Rica, and it was so cool. They just each had their mics. They were sitting back, having a great time, and it inspired me to do my own little bedside chat for you. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm in a different spot to where I usually am. And when I actually started recording this, I was actually like laying on my side, but I had to restart because my shoulder was just started to hurt a little too much. So there's that. But I also typically follow a general guideline of the things that I want to touch on in a given podcast episode. But today, I just could not come up with one idea because I just feel like there's a lot flowing into my heart right now that I've been thinking about. And so I just decided to get out the mic. And so I hope that whatever flows into my heart is something that your own heart really needed you to hear today as well. And personally, what's been coming up for me a lot the last few days, if you listen to the last 2 or 3 episodes of my podcast, I dedicated all of those conversations to talking about approaching burnout and overwhelm with more of a mindset of introducing freedom into your life, to appreciate structure more, and to introduce freedom so that your nervous system feels a lot less constrained and resistant because it might perceive that structure as a total loss of autonomy. But obviously, when you have a conversation about routine and structure, you also get into the conversation of how we have learned to punish ourselves into doing life, into achieving our goals. And I think that this is such a particularly important conversation for us girlies with a history of complex trauma or PTSD, where our bodies and our brains and our past wounds give us so many needs to accommodate, as far as things like avoiding crowded places or struggling with depression and low motivation, especially first thing in the mornings, or maybe needing a lot of time to recharge after social interactions because we need ample time to be with ourselves. And I've just been thinking a lot about what that fine line is between honoring the needs that have been shaped because of our past without letting a lot of that impede on how we want to live our lives as freely as possible. And then that got me thinking about how we can actually do so much more damage to our already perhaps weak sense of self worth because of the things that we've been through in early life. When we introduce a routine or a structure that we cannot stick to perfectly, or if we don't stick to it, we interpret that as a complete reflection of our discipline and just how capable we are in this life. I'll tell you a personal story about my struggle with structure and routine. And it's something that I've struggled with a lot for a very long time because when I was as young as 7, 8 years old, I became a high level gymnast. And as the years went on and I started improving and moving into provincial teams, most of my week was dedicated to training and recovering. And from the time I was very young, I did not really have say over my time or my creative pursuits. I learned that if I wanted to excel in that sport, I had to sacrifice everything for that sport. And that meant sacrificing other desires for it. And this works for some people. This is something that some people see, whether it's a sport or another profession or a hobby, and they see that one thing and that's all that matters to them, and that's fantastic. But I am a curious gal. I'm a Gemini with like 3 or 4 Gemini placements, and that just means that I'm always on the move. I'm dynamic, I have multiple interests, and having to turn that off, that part of myself from a very young age, unfolded in repercussions that only now am I seeing in my adulthood. And this is something that actually played out years later after I'd stopped being a gymnast in my first ever relationship, where I was with a man who wanted to be a professional athlete. And similarly to what had happened in my youth, this person's weekly, daily routine was governed by an exceptionally tight schedule. I'm talking like 6 to 6:05, then 6:05 to 6:08. There was a task filling every moment, every minute of his day. And I witnessed this person only suffer, honestly, at the hands of this routine, because if something happened, which on most days it did because that is just life, if something happened that threw off his schedule by a couple of minutes, where he could not do a task or get somewhere by the desired time that he'd set out for himself, he would just have full blown anxiety attacks. It would affect the energy of everybody else around him, including me. And our relationship would often take the brunt of that because he had to overcompensate for the things that he missed out on by taking time away from us or presence away from our time together. And I think after all those years and experiencing that with another person, I started to fear routine a lot, and I associated routine with a complete and utter loss of autonomy. But over the years, as I've done a lot of work on myself to understand the voice in my head and how I actually view myself through that voice in my head, and this is especially true if you are a woman whose survival hinged on pleasing others before yourself, being the mediator in the house, or just having to grow up too quickly to take care of those around you, even the adults you were supposed to rely on. You tend to see everything in your life that goes wrong as a reflection of something you did not do to control for a better outcome. And I really want you to hear me when I say that, because personally, even so much of the anxiety and panic and guilt I have dealt with throughout my life has been from expecting myself to foresee or predict something and blaming myself for doing things that I didn't know I needed to do to result in a better outcome. And I think that that ties in so closely to struggling with structure, because if you have hinged your survival on always being two steps ahead, when something goes wrong in your day, your brain takes that as evidence to show that you are incapable and or that you're a good for nothing, and that will just compound the harm that you do to your self-esteem. And I think being someone with a body that has deep needs of feeling protected, of feeling safe, of feeling taken care of, and not having those needs met by you or in conjunction with the people around you, the harm that we do to ourselves in our day to day structure can worsen or even backtrack our healing, because when we see our entire day as being a vessel through which we have to prove ourselves disciplined and motivated and worthy enough, your entire life becomes an endless pool of suffering, because you are always performing for the expectations of somebody else who, I'm sure, when you really sit and think about it, that voice in your head that is always driving you to the ground, you probably can't even put a name behind, or it's just the combined voice of people and videos and examples that you've witnessed over the years that have given you this idea that you are responsible for controlling every variable in your life, when that is just not true. And I think the way forward from leading a life where you are perpetuating the very abuse that was done onto you, it sounds harsh, but ultimately it's true. The same way that we move towards partners who reflect the dynamic that we witnessed in the house, we too are perpetuating the very abuse that we faced onto ourselves when we do not recognize that we no longer have to survive by yielding to other people's expectations. But that is a learned skill. And I think that one of the ways that we stop outsourcing our power to the expectations of other people is by asking ourselves, what would make you want to spend more time in your own skin? And that might sound like a very jolting question at first, because you might be someone who really struggles with patterns of dissociation or numbness or looking outside of yourself for validation. But ultimately, this is the body that we've been given, and this is the body that we have to learn to love and inhabit to make into a wonderful, loving home for ourselves. And I think that a lot of time the advice around learn how to move through life with pleasure and presence can come off as very unclear when you can't really sit inside yourself for that long without needing to jump outside of yourself for distraction or for comfort from the emotions that we are buffering all the time. And so when I say, what are behaviors that would want to make you be inside your skin more, I'm talking about simple ways of moving through your day that would make you less likely to numb out or procrastinate or sit wide eyed in fear at the things you need to do, because you are creating an environment for yourself, within yourself, to move through those things with more ease or even thrive through those things. So, for example, you might be someone who really struggles with comprehending things that are written or by audio. You need to see things visually. And this might mean that you take longer with things to learn and to understand them. But making your body a safer place to be in those moments could be by giving yourself extra time through those tasks to you yourself draw a picture of what you're learning, or pausing a lesson and going on YouTube or Google Images to search for an image. And while you're doing that, you're accepting your needs rather than shaming them. This might mean that you push yourself to go a day without makeup if you're typically shaming yourself into wearing makeup because you don't think you look good or acceptable without it. Or it might be that you have a ritual before doing things that really scare you to touch base with yourself and with your inner child instead of, again, guilting or shaming yourself into doing that thing. So if you have to go into a difficult conversation with a friend or a partner, or you have to give a presentation at work, maybe you have a set ritual that you do before those things where you create space for your inner child to state her fears and her worries, or you just mind dump them on a page instead of trying to bypass them because you think that the only way to function is by ignoring them. And I think that where this creates even more compounded healing for you, if you have a history of complex trauma, is that, as I mentioned earlier, your body and your nervous system already have deeper needs to feel safe and protected. But if you are constantly shaming yourself and guilting yourself and frankly abusing yourself into doing things that scare you or make you sad or anxious, your body is never truly going to feel like you have its back. And therefore, the healing that you progress through from your past is going to take a lot longer because you are trying to heal your body when it doesn't even feel safe to be with you, the healer. And I really want you to wrap your head around that. And I think that this is one of the hardest things that women with complex histories of neglect and abuse and self abandonment can do, which is to learn to meet their emotions and their thoughts, however irrational they may seem, with the utmost love, because it is a language that they are learning from scratch on their own. But when you learn to speak that language to your body and to demonstrate to your body that you are here unconditionally with the love and acceptance that it needs to open up the hurt behind your wounds to you, that is how you start to take your own life back into your hands, and you no longer will feel like you are surviving for the expectations of others. The same way how in a romantic relationship, we need a partner to demonstrate that they have our back by showing us that they're not trying to fix us when we have problems, by doing things out of their way to take care of us, like pick us up from the airport or from a night out when we don't want to transit alone at night, or just hold us in our vulnerability without judgment. The same is true for what your body and your inner child need of you. And one of the most powerful and sacred, but most subtle places to practice that is how you move through your daily routine. And the last piece about this that I want to bring your attention to is I want you to think about what are things that you make yourself do in a day because you think you need to do them to be worthy of respect and love, not actually because you intentionally want to do those things. So, personally, I'll tell you another story. I realized kind of recently that I don't really like the gym after being a gym rat for like 10 years. I went to university and got my Bachelor of Science in kinesiology. Therefore, I was always hanging around people who were like gym bros, gym gals, going to the gym at 5:30 in the morning, posting their progress all the time on their stories. And don't get me wrong, it was a super motivating and supportive environment to be in, especially when we were learning about how to optimize our fitness through our degree. It was super, super fun. But at the time, I was in an environment where I felt like if I wasn't a gym aficionada myself, I would not fit in with these people. And so I in moving with that group energy, I started going to the gym more. I was going to the gym like 4 or 5 times a week. And in the last 6 months, I started dealing with some pretty sudden gut health issues that impacted my energy and my emotional health and my physical health a lot. And so I had to take a big step back from the output at which I was performing at in my fitness. And in that time, I had to move to more gentle forms of movement like yoga or walking or lighter hikes. And when I had the space to let my body tell me how it wanted to move in those moments, what I started realizing is that my obsession with going to the gym was still hinged on this need for belonging. And I think also too we constantly absorb all these messages on the internet from gym bros who are like telling us how the only way to live life is through suffering, through weight sets and blah blah blah. And don't get me wrong, I think the gym is a wonderful, fantastic place to train your mindset, but I in that time really got to invest more of my time into my newfound love for dance after not dancing for like 10, 15 years from when I was a teenager, and realizing that I felt the happiest and the healthiest when I did that and focus my fitness on improving in that rather than working on even like upping my weight on squats or on bench press. And I still go to the gym because it's one of those things that is necessary with all the evidence on bone density and muscle mass decreasing after 30, 35 in women, especially with menopause. I think that everybody should weight train at least once a week. But all of that to say, what are you doing and suffering through right now because you think it is necessary to maintain your identity and your sense of self worth rather than because you truly want to? And that is not to say that everything we do in this life will always be something that we want to do. There's going to be a lot of things in this life that on many days we will not want to do. But if you were raised to associate living with suffering, to associate success with pure sacrifice, and to associate ease or desiring ease with entitlement, your life right now is perpetuating the very pain that you are trying to heal from completely outside of your awareness. And my love, you are a woman, which means that you run on a 28-day cycle, which every day requires something different of you, which for at least 10 to 2 weeks requires that you do a lot of inner work to then shed all that you were 28 days prior. And especially in a world where our safety is so threatened and we need to learn how to cultivate a deep sense of self trust in our bodies and our intuition, building a life with suffering as the foundation will only disconnect you from that and make you feel more unsafe to move through this world because you will never feel like you truly have yourself. And why would you survive all that you went through just to serve yourself the very pain, neglect, and judgment that others served you that you did not deserve So why would you deserve to get that from yourself? You're not here to live a life sentence to sacrificing yourself and your needs for the things that you want. You are here to learn how to live each day as a prayer, as a ceremony, as a celebration to the miracle that it is to be alive and to the miracle that it is to get to choose to live each day anew. And believe me, mama, your main character energy, your liberated woman era begins when the script that you choose to read from today is one of pure, unconditional, unwavering love towards yourself, even if it's a script that you are writing from scratch and learning how to read for the very first time. Let your daily timetable and how you move through your day be an ode to that, be a ceremony to the love that you are learning to give yourself after not receiving it in the ways that you deserved. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're tuning in from. Give it a like, save it to listen to and come back to later. Send it to a friend or a loved one who needs to hear this advice as well. And if you are looking for a community of women who are also healing from the complex trauma in their bodies, hearts, and minds, I began a sisterhood called Belong about 2 or 3 years ago as a community that I wish I had had through my own journey of healing, where I am giving women the tools right now to empower themselves and take their lives back from the chains of their past. So if you are looking for this kind of support and community, I highly encourage that you join my sisterhood called Belong. And I will leave the details on how to create an account and join us for free for 30 days in the description below the episode. Thank you so much again for tuning into this episode, and I will see you in the next one.